Hello, I'm Brady Riggs, and this week we're going to go through shaping the swing. I know we've talked a lot about it in the past, and people have had trouble trying to figure out how to get the club to point correctly in the transition. So what I want to do today is go through a little bit about what happens when the club's not pointed correctly, what are some of the common mistakes that you see, and then kind of go through over time some drills that will help you get in the right place. So let's talk really quick about where the right place is. When we talk about being on plane at the top, or in the transition specifically, what we're talking about is when the hands are just at shoulder height, just below shoulder height, an extension of the shaft points at or outside what is the target line, which is a line drawn from the ball to the target. What most people do, not all, but what most people do is get steep in the transition. Steep in the transition means that as the club is starting down, it's pointed instead of at or outside the target line, it's actually pointed towards your toes. Now there's four normal things we see when a player gets steep, and they sort of depend on how good the player is. And there are obviously a few more than that, but the four big ones are this. The first is when a player gets steep, they just stay steep, and we see this with a lot of high handicap players. They come down steep, the club stays steep, and they basically hit way from outside in. Now the ball flight with that would be chunks or deep divots, pulls, pull slices, and even some shanks. The second problem we see is also with higher handicap players. They'll get the shaft in that same steep position, and instead of staying steep, they'll kind of keep their arms out and then drop the club down. A player who does this will hit the toe of the club a lot, lose a lot of distance. It looks something like this. Steep in the transition, hands go out, hit the toe. Toed shots, slices, and even some tops from there. Here's the third normal thing we see. Good players miss. The player gets steep in the transition. They know they need to come from the inside. The club drops in behind them, and now the club attacks from too far from the inside. We see pushes, hooks, and again, even a good player can shank it from this position where they get a little steep in the transition, drops inside out too much, and they're going to hit it to the right to start, maybe hook back, or hit the hosel. Here's the fourth thing that we see. It's called luck. Every once in a while, a player will get steep in the transition, especially a good player. They'll slide the hips enough to drop it inside, hang behind it, flip their hands over, and find a way out towards the target. Obviously, this thing works every once in a while, but if you had to play with it on Sunday when it really counted, I don't think you're going to have a lot of success. So those are the four main things that we see when the player gets steep in the transition. We're going to start working on some drills next.